All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the College Sports Communicators webinar today, hosted by the Young Professionals Committee. We are super excited to offer this session to you guys today on finding the right fit and establishing yourself in the industry. And I think we've got three pros here who can kind of help us work through this today. Thanks for joining us today, and it's an important discussion as we discuss how to help you strategize and identify the right career opportunities, build a strong foundation in the industry, and find the importance of aligning personal values with institutional culture. I'm Dani Gariglio, Assistant Director of Athletics for Operations at Davidson College, and I'll be serving as the webinar moderator today. If anybody has any questions for our panelists as we're going along, feel free to throw those in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can throughout this discussion. And as always, we are recording this webinar and it will be offered to all who work in college athletics free of charge as an on-demand video and a podcast. So please invite your fellow CSC members and all of your colleagues to watch too. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. And we'll meet today's guest panelists. So starting with you, Lynn, why don't you give us a quick intro?
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Lynn Walsh. I am the Director of Communications and Creative Content at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina.
How about you, Patrick?
Morning, everyone. Afternoon from wherever you're watching. Thanks for joining us. My name is Patrick Murphy. I'm the Athletic Communications Assistant out here at the Colorado School of Mines, and I'm also the chair of the CSC Creative and Digital Design Contest.
All right. What's up, folks? Jerod Fox, Assistant Athletic Director for Strategic Communications at Kansas City Athletics on the University of Missouri, Kansas City.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. As we look at like the headline of this, finding the right fit and establishing yourself in the industry, I think there's a ton of different ways that we could sort of start this off. But I thought a cool way to kind of kick things off is if each of you could sort of briefly describe your path into athletic communications and then how you knew that the institution you're at right now is the right fit for you. So Jerod, I'll kind of start with you and then you pass it back to Patrick and Lynn.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I went to Hastings College in Nebraska, small NAI school for my undergrad. Studied broadcasting there, really got into the broadcasting, the live video side of things. As I went through school, I worked very closely with our athletic department and with our SID. And as I was getting out, I kind of knew I didn't really want to go the local news route, MMJ, all that jazz. So I was trying to figure out what was right, what seemed like a good fit for me. And I talked to the SID at Hastings, and he kind of pushed me in this direction, thought it would be somewhere that I would fit well in. So ended up applying to quite a few graduate assistantships, got the offer here at Kansas City, and the rest is history. That was 6 years ago. Did my 2 years as a GA, and I've been four years full-time.
Awesome.
Well, for me, my journey is kind of an interesting one. I never knew what this industry was when I was going into college, and I went to school thinking I was going to be an engineer. We all see how that worked out. I went to school at Missouri University of Science and Technology, otherwise known as Missouri S&T in Rolla, Missouri. Thought I was going to be an architectural engineering major. Figured out after a year and a half that was hard, and that wasn't quite gonna work out for me. But I was fortunate enough to get involved with intercollegiate athletics very early in my time at S&T. Tried to walk on the baseball team, didn't make it. Came back first week of classes, talked with the head coach about being involved with the program as a manager. Did that for the entire time I was on campus, but that also opened up opportunities for me to work with our athletic communications office on campus. Got to work with Luke Rennie, who's now at, I believe, University of Missouri St. Louis, and CSC Hall of Famer John Keane. They kind of opened my eyes to the industry and showed me what all this was. And, you know, I answered a newsletter call for workers that, looking to work the football scoreboard my sophomore year, and then became, one of the people that, I was one of the go-to folks to do, everything on game days, PA for basketball or broadcasting or camera operator or, bookkeeper, you name it. I was able to go in and do it. spent a couple summers working in the Northwoods League in Wisconsin, figuring I would want to work in sports in some capacity. So I was just trying to get as much experience doing as many different things as I could while I was still in college. My second summer up there, I saw an opportunity come up for an athletic communications internship at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Um, Ended up applying, got the opportunity to go down there, had to go from Wausau, Wisconsin to Daytona Beach in the span of a week. So that was an adventure, and also kind of an early theme in my career was a lot of long distance moves. So I went down to Embry-Riddle for a year. That was actually the pandemic year, so that was the 1920 school year. Kind of got caught in between things, didn't know what was going to be next. Had full-time opportunities I was trying to chase down that summer of 2020. And I think this will be a point we come to later in our conversation, but just, uncertainty and, passing on one opportunity to take something that is more readily available. So I ended up going back to Florida at Jacksonville University for a year as another post-grad intern. Spent a year down there, was getting ready to go on year two, and then position came back up at Missouri S&T as the assistant. So I went back there for my first full-time position, did a year there, and then saw an opportunity come up out here at Colorado School of Mines um, that I couldn't pass on. It checked a lot of boxes, not necessarily just with work, but outside of work as well in my personal life, and that was really significant for me. And here we are wrapping up year three with an incredible crew out here, and not looking to go anywhere anytime soon because let me tell you, moving 12, 13 hours across the country at the same time every year for a while got expensive really quick.
Yeah, my path is actually very similar to Jared's. I was a student athlete in college, went in as a broadcast journalism major, so was doing sideline reporting for my school. So that was a lot to balance, being a fall student athlete, and then trying to pick up shifts, trying to get involved, trying to get that hands-on experience, which is so critical to gaining a full-time role in college athletics. But still kind of had in the back of my mind, I wanted to be a news anchor. I loved earning my degree, but I also could not sit still in a cubicle from 9 to 5. I needed something that was not kind of your in the box type of career. I knew I just wouldn't like doing PR communications for an organization, for a business. Had the same thoughts as Jerod, as I don't really want to go the broadcasting life that requires also, like what Patrick said, a lot of moves, a lot of going places, things you might not be interested in. And it took a little longer than it should have for it to click that I'd been doing this on-campus internship for 3 years. And I had a boss, and oh, like that job's pretty cool. That doesn't quite seem like work. So it took me a lot longer than probably a lot of you on this call to figure that out. And through some connections, which is another thing I think we'll hit on here, that I had made at my undergraduate school, playing volleyball and being a student athlete, that led to some open opportunities at a different school in a conference, kind of led me to my first position. It was actually through an NCAA diversity and inclusion internship grant. I believe they're still doing those. And again, for those of you on this call, cannot advocate for those opportunities enough. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. Professional development is high on the list of those things of what they're doing. Was at that spot for 4 years, kind of worked my way through the ranks. Felt like it was time for me to find something else. And long story short, Charleston checked all the boxes. And it's the third time I've said this, and I'm only on my intro, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. And finding the right fit for you, right? Charleston had all those things for me.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think the interesting part that you guys all kind of touched on in your intro is early on in your career when you're looking at job opportunities, there's so many different versions of what that might look like, whether that's a post-grad internship, graduate assistantship, diving right into a full-time role. For you guys, what factors helped you determine early on, and we're all still like looking at the grand scheme of things, we're still early in our careers too, like what factors helped you realize what's going to be a good fit for you culturally with the institution, maybe even just what you're looking for, like Patrick, you mentioned in your personal life. Lynn, I'll start with you and then we'll kind of go back through.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you have your individual list of priorities, and that's going to be different for everyone, right? My priorities were three things, right? When I was looking for this next opportunity that landed me at Charleston, right? I wanted to stay a director. I had that opportunity at my last position and felt like I was ready to continue on with that. I had kind of found my niche in men's basketball, so I wanted that to be one of my sports that I covered, and I wanted to be by a beach, right? So you take all three of those things together, and they were all very equally as much important to me, right? And that's me. And you're not going to find a lot of big name schools there, right? You got to kind of find this perfect thing. And it was going to take me a lot to leave my last position for a job like this, right? And Charleston fit that mold. It was kind of my unicorn opportunity. Like I said I am very big on enjoying my life when I leave my job, right? That was part of the reason for this transition too in my personal life. This career can be a lot if you allow yourself to kind of fall into the trap that it is your life. And with some people, that's their priority list, right? And that's when I say it's up to you to decide, does that mean a big name school, which might mean going to a location you don't like? Does that mean maybe not caring as much about what sports you do with, or if you get to travel, right? It's different for everyone, and there's no right or wrong answer to it. But it's important that you stick to your guns on those things and don't just take an opportunity because you feel like it's the time to take one. Make sure it's the right opportunity.
Yeah, no, when I remember my first opportunity post college was actually, when I went down to Embry-Riddle, I was actually still finishing up graduate school, and obviously I was working in Wisconsin, but I saw that as an opportunity to continue working at a similar style of school that I had been with for the previous 6 years. So I felt like that may give me a little bit of an advantage and, be able to be a little bit more relatable with my athletes and understand what they're going through, and talk with them and understand them, and kind of still be around those same kinds of individuals, but also like what Lynn was saying, looking at the location and everything else that comes with that. Um, Daytona Beach, I'm a NASCAR fan. Daytona International Speedway is right there. So I was, I was kind of, hey, this is awesome. I can go down there. I can go see the race. I can go do things outside of work. I'm 15 minutes from the beach, and enjoy that, and just kind of evaluated everything of, okay, I want to do this for a living, but and this opportunity is here now. For me to go ahead and get this. I have the flexibility to finish up my graduate degree online. I have literally one class left. I'm going to go ahead and jump on this. And then obviously everything, happened with the pandemic, and everything shut down, and just trying to wait out everybody's hiring freezes. I was kind of a long summer there, and just kind of evaluating positions. And at the time I was living with my girlfriend. We were in the middle of 5.5 years of a long distance relationship. And I don't want to say I was applying for every job everywhere, but it was pretty close, and I wasn't necessarily taking a lot into consideration as far as location. I understood what she did for a living, and she would probably have an easier time finding a job than, wherever I ended up. If things ended up working out on, I went somewhere full time. Um, but going through that, I had a full-time opportunity at an NAIA school in Georgia. It just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and it got to the point where I just couldn't wait anymore. And then, Jacksonville University saw my name on the CSC job boards at the right time. I checked all their boxes. And it was more of, I have an opportunity. They're like, hey man, we want you. We're going to pay for your food. We're going to pay for your housing. It's, you know, how soon can you get here? And I had to weigh a guaranteed opportunity against something that was full-time salaried with benefits, versus going back and doing, another internship. And looking back, I don't think I necessarily would have done anything differently. My two internships really helped, get me used to the industry. The first year kind of figuring out, okay, I call it, the 100 level SID course of like learning how to do this for a living, being a professional. And then, um, going to Jacksonville was the 300 level course. Um, Obviously, is going back to Florida. I was, a day away from my partner in Kansas City. The opportunity at Missouri S&T came up. I was like, okay, well, it's a lot closer. It's 4.5 hours. So we're working on trying to get closer back together. It's a full-time opportunity. It's a place I know. It's a place that I know I can make an impact at. I know the area. I know, going back there's going to be easy for me. I know who I'm working with and everything else. So that played a part in that. And then obviously the opportunity out here at Mines, like I mentioned in my intro, it just checked a lot of boxes outside of work. The company that my girlfriend was working for at the time had an office just north of Golden and Broomfield. So if I got the opportunity to come out here, which I did, she would follow me out. She would transfer out, which she did, and we're finally able to live together. And we got engaged last summer, and now we're getting married next summer. So that was a big part of what I was. Thank you, everybody. That was a big part of my decision-making process out here. Was I wasn't necessarily I had to shift my mindset of thinking selfishly what I want to do and where I want to be, as opposed to what's better for us, being myself and my girlfriend long term. And again, I'm a career small school guy, pretty much. I enjoy working at this level. I get to be a lot more hands-on. I feel like I get to build relationships with my student athletes better. I'm working at STEM schools. Even though I didn't get the STEM degree, I've been around them now for more than a decade, so I understand what all the kids are going through and can relate to them and everything else. And that's a big, that all played a big part in, everything. I was consciously thinking about where I went, why I was going places, and ultimately how I ended up where I have.
Yeah, I'll just kind of build on what both Lynn and Patrick have both said. Lynn said something about making a list and figuring out your priorities. I think that's really important and something one of my professors, as I was going through grad school, Dr. Tiffany Riggers-Peel, shout out to Dr. RP. She was a great mentor, helped me out a lot. But in our capstone class, she took one of our class periods and just that entire time kind of walked us through, as you're getting to the career field and looking for these full-time jobs, you need to know what you're looking for. You need to know what's important to you. So whether that's culture in a workplace, whether that's opportunity for growth, whether that's location, you have a family, you have to take those things into mind, but really sitting down and making a physical list rather than just trying to keep everything in your mind. But sitting down, making a list and thinking about, okay, as I look for opportunities, what's going to be important to me? What do I want to be looking for? What do I want out of this next job? Do I want it to be somewhere that I want to stay for 55 years and retire here? Or do I want it to be the stepping stone for whatever's next in my career? Not to say that everything works linearly and it's all going to be just an upward climb. But having that list and knowing what you're looking for helps set you in that direction. As I was looking at Kansas City, I'm from the Wichita area, went to undergrad in Nebraska. So I've been around the Midwest my entire life. It was close to family. That was big in helping me make my decision. My youngest brother is still in high school right now. And so being within 3 hours of family and getting to go back and watch his baseball games, go see family, on the rare occasion that we have a weekend off. Things like that were really important to me. I was also the jump and working for a Division I institution was obviously intriguing, especially coming right out of undergrad. But I was also taking into account that, this isn't like an Alabama or a big power conference school where I'll kind of have my one role and stick to that. But coming to Kansas City, which is a mid-major, low-major school, there were going to be opportunities here for me to grow and to get just so much a wealth of experience in the career field that I maybe wouldn't have gotten other places. And so that was something that was great for me. And it just happened to work out that I've ended up here full time. That wasn't necessarily my plan coming out of undergrad or going through grad school. But I've felt blessed with the way that they've treated me and just the opportunities that I've had here and the growth that I've experienced.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it can be really empowering for a young person when looking at, job boards and you're looking for that first job, second job, whatever it may be early on. If you can have that honest conversation with yourself about what you want right now and what you want that to look like, you're kind of like taking the power back in that situation. Like, okay, I'm not looking to apply for every single job that's open. Patrick, I've been in your shoes too. You touched on it like back in 2020. I needed a job and I was applying to anyone that was out there. But if you do know what you want and you're willing to kind of wait for that right move, it's I think that can really set you up for success, and you're not just applying and taking anything that comes your way, but really, putting in the time to figure out what's right for you at that particular time in your life. So we touched on this a little bit, but what are some strategies that you guys have used in your interview or application process that you're trying to identify, is this place, is this team a good fit for me culturally? Like, what's their work-life balance like? What is the leadership like? What are some strategies you guys have done to kind of fill in the blanks on those questions in the process? And Jerod, I'll start with you and we'll go down the way.
Awesome. Yeah. I think, just as much as you're getting interviewed, you are interviewing the place. And I'm sure the others would agree with that. You want to be looking for, as I said, the right fit. You don't want to show up somewhere and then all of a sudden realize, I can't do this. I can't be here for more than 2 months. And then, you get through your fall sports season and you're burnt out on it already. So really being intentional as you're going through the interview process and paying attention to what they're giving you, the information that they're giving you, is something that'll help a lot. And asking those questions that aren't always the easiest questions to ask, but asking about work-life balance, asking about what's the community like within the department, and I think another thing, and this is one of the important things about being active and being a member in CSC, is you're able to build your network, and you know people that know people, or people who have been at that institution in the past, and you can lean on your network and talk to people within your network who maybe have had some experiences or are in the same conference, can speak on the job that you're looking at taking. But I think the big thing is just, do your homework. If you know what coaches you're going to be working for, study up on those coaches, kind of get an understanding. If you know who you're replacing and there's someone that you can get in contact with, talk to them. I'm sure 95% of people within this industry are willing to talk about their experiences, and whether it's oh no, I just had to get out of there, I couldn't stand so and so, or if it was, no, this opened up for me, I'm very grateful for my time at XYZ University.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of, yeah,
Go ahead,
go.
Patrick.
So, no, there's a lot of great points that Jerod brought up there. It's always tricky, that interview process. If you're doing a phone interview, obviously you can't see anybody. You're just listening to a voice. If you get a Zoom, it's 30, 45 minutes to looking through a computer at someone. And if you get to the on-campus stage, you have 4 or 5 hours to try and get a read on everybody while being in a blender and be just kind of having some sensory overload. But a lot, if you go into the process before you even apply for the job, just kind of like look at their website, go through their socials, see areas that you think that you could help improve on. Come up with questions, like come prepared with questions to ask during the interview process when you get to certain points. When you're talking with like senior administrators about work-life balance, when you're talking with the communication staff about, what are some areas you would like to do more with or improve on, and, come prepared with, oh, hey, I can help with, X, or I could help do Y. Be able to, you're not just trying to sell yourself, but you're also trying to get an understanding of what that your potential employer is looking to try and do. And being honest, being truthful. I said, being, like what everybody else has said, being, putting together a list of how to consider places when you're applying, and just being really diligent with your preparation can go a long way in helping, facilitate that whole process.
I loved Jerod's point about networking with other people through CSC. Everybody knows someone, although it might seem big, this industry is very small. And when you're on a Zoom interview call, like, just to be blunt and straightforward, you ask how the culture is. It's great. Everybody loves each other. It's fantastic. Energy's great. We're high, right? Like, because they want you to come work for them, right? And maybe that's true, and hopefully it is, but people can give you kind of the more nitty-gritty things, right? What kind of worker are they? When do they expect you to be in the office? What are their top priorities? Are they communicative, right? Are they getting back to you? Are they responding to your emails? Do they get things done quick? A former boss of mine always liked to say, athletic timetable is different than a campus timetable, right? We move at a different pace, right? Are they on that pace? Are they moving? And on the same time, it's important for yourself to embody those things that you're looking for as well, right? If you want to interview, respond quick, right? Check your email, check your text messages. There's way too many times that things just go by, and my interns, and I think some of them might be on this call, and I don't think it's the guilty ones, right? But you guys aren't on your phones, right? Like you're using Snapchat and you're using Instagram, and it takes me forever to get a text message back, right? Or an email, right? Check your email, be responsive, show that you want this opportunity, because then it's going to come back to you in tenfold.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as always, just a quick reminder, if anybody has any questions for our panelists, feel free to throw those in the chat and we'll get right to those. So kind of turning the page from, personal journeys and career fits and looking sort of what we started to touch on here of establishing yourself in the industry and getting involved in CSC and building that network and all the things that kind of go into that. Lynn, I'll start with you. What were some of the most effective ways you found to kind of build your network and your personal credibility in this industry in some of your first few roles that kind of led you to Charleston?
Yeah, saying yes to anything, right? And that doesn't mean just being a yes man. It means someone asks you to go get coffee. Yeah, I'll go. I might not like coffee, but I can go sit and have conversation and get a tea, right? Those things too. Hey, can you come help me set up these chairs? The facilities team is backed up here. Can you come help me do this? Yeah, for sure. Remember that it's one big team. Because like I said, this industry is small and people know people, right? That's not just in an SID or a communications department, but that's across campus, right? I may know someone at Davidson who works in their business office, right? And like the groups don't overlap a lot, but they could tell me, oh yeah, Dani says hi to me in the hallway and she always seems like she's having a good time, right? Like it's those minor things of what your personal brand is and how you want to be perceived. It just goes about how you carry yourself, right? And that was one of the things. I knew people here at Charleston, right? And I knew how they talked about the place. I knew who had my job before me. I knew that, like Dani had said earlier, it was just another opportunity that got her to move. And it was really tough for her, right? So that was a good sign for me in coming here of, okay, it was tough for her to leave. That's a good sign, right? The people I'm talking to on the phone, they seem like they love it here. Everyone always says, oh, Charleston, Charleston, right? That's a place I want to be that fit my priority list. And same thing with my prior stop too. I competed against the school for 4 years, right? I knew what kind of department it was. I knew the athletes that were there. I saw what they did on social media, right? Like I saw what I was walking into and could build upon and leave my mark on a place like that. So it's always really just being observant, I think, is kind of the key takeaway from my spiel. Observant of others and observant of yourself and how you're carrying yourself day to day.
Love that. Patrick, we'll go to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, Lynn made some really, really good, points out there. Like I said, just being observant, and just being open to feedback, be receptive to feedback, learn from your mistakes. When you're trying to get established, you're going to make mistakes. The question is, are you going to be able to learn from them? Or are you going to just be able to keep making them over and over again? I know, I had one, kerfuffle, when I was in school, running our baseball team social as the manager and everything. We were at another conference school. I was up in the press box doing my charts and everything else, doing our socials, and made it, switched from the team account to my personal account to make a comment about something that was going on in the press box, with the game crew going after the umpires or whatever. And I was just like, oh my God, LOL, chill. Didn't realize that the host SID had location turned on so he could see everything that was posted within the vicinity. So that made for a very uncomfortable and awkward situation. The guy, he's a longtime SID, been in the industry for a while. Knew our guys. So like by the time the game was over, like I already had messages and like voicemails, like, hey, like what happened? Let's resolve this. Everything else. So then we got through the course of the weekend, and of course the weather played a factor in the whole weekend. So we were there for a long time. But by the time we got to the last game of the series, you know, I walked out with my coach, SID walked out with his coach. We made up, everything else. But just understanding, like, hey, if when you're on the job, like you're on the job. Don't be hopping on your personal stuff and posting things that people might see. Because again, you never know who's going to see it. But I made that mistake once and I haven't made that mistake since. So being like I said, being able to understand when you've made a mistake, being able to learn from those, being able to just have conversations with people about, what you're doing good, what you're doing, maybe not doing so well, how can you do things better? And a big part of that is just building the relationships with people in your office. Going like what Lynn said, going out and getting coffee or getting lunch or, just, even if even if you only know you're going to be there for a year, if you're, on an internship or if you're a graduate assistant, knowing you're only be there for maybe a year or two, um, you know, maximize the most of that time, with the people you're around. Because everybody's going to shape how you do your job and how you go about pursuing your career in a different manner. Um, and networking is always a big piece of it. I know it's a little bit different now than it was when we were all going through college. I know a lot of my network came through the old YP Sports Chat. Um, I'm sure some people know on this call know what that is, and some people may not, and that's fine. But that was a big part of how I was able to develop my network and be able to just meet people. And then obviously, having gotten somewhat established now, going to, getting involved with CSC, with the Young Professionals Committee, with the Creative and Digital Design Contest, and going to convention and just, seeing people year after year, meeting new people. Just never stop meeting people and never stop trying to expand your network because you never know when you'll need to go to somebody. Even if all you did was just like shake their hand at convention, like you never know when you might need to go to them and ask for help or something, or to help fill a job, or help solve a live stats question. Yeah, so those would probably be my two big takeaways right there.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on, but just to kind of build, I think what Patrick said about being open and honest about your mistakes and learning from them is a really big one. We all work very hard in this industry. We're asked to work miserable hours, to be quite honest. And so I think sometimes it's easy to get a little bit defensive when something does go wrong. But to kind of push down that natural response and recognize, okay, look, I'm not perfect. I made this mistake. How can I learn from it? I think that goes a long way in establishing yourself as someone who's trustworthy and reliable. And then, down the road, that's something that will reflect well back on you. And then to build on what Lynn said, just continually jump on those opportunities as they come to you. I think one of the great things about Kansas City is there's tons of schools in the area, KU, K-State, Mizzou, all just down the road, as well as a plethora of D2 NAIA schools in the area. And so one thing that's been great, or that helped me begin to build my network, is once a year there was a Kansas City Athletic Communications or Kansas City area SID get together, where all of the schools in the area would be invited. We'd just go out for a happy hour, have some drinks, fellowship, talk for hours on end. And so that was a really good start to building that network. And then just continually building from there by becoming involved in CSC, going to conventions, meeting people, always being a friendly face, someone that people can approach. If people aren't approaching you, being bold enough to go and approach them, because there's not many people in this industry who aren't willing to have a conversation, who aren't willing to talk. It's just about starting and sparking that conversation.
Yeah, that's great. I think the one thing I was thinking about kind of while each of you were talking just now is the willingness to put yourself out there, and that might be out of your comfort zone. And I think it is for all of us in some way, especially in a professional setting. But at one point, the four of us were willing to kind of put ourselves out there and join the Young Professionals Committee. And now it's been a couple years where we're colleagues and, friends in this industry too. And that's can really like become the foundation of your network, is people that you not only trust because of the profession, but you trust the people that they are too, to kind of lead you in the right direction and help you when you need help, whether that's hiring somebody student worker or you're looking to go to a role that they may have in their office. On a similar note, but with some questions we kind of got in the chat, we'll sort of pivot to those here quickly. Our first question is, I eventually want to work in a role that deals with media relations more than my current one does, which might involve moving up into a higher level position than where they're currently at. What can I do to make myself a more enticing candidate to people hiring at those levels? And I think maybe we can look at this as like whether that's like a higher level role or maybe also like an institution that has maybe more media relations with that traditional media. I know at Davidson, like we're Division I, but we don't get a ton of media interaction with the exception of our basketball team. So we could kind of look at it twofold here. Lynn, I'll kind of have you start off here.
Yeah, and Jake, I see your question here. This is exactly the move I made. So my first job was a Division III institution in Virginia, and it was in the same town as a Division I institution, right? With that being said, it was still a small town. So we got some coverage, but that took work on our end, right? Getting to know, it was one sports director, one newspaper writer, a couple radio, right? But just reaching out saying, hey, I know you've got a lot going on with this bigger Division I school down the road, but we're having a pretty cool event tonight over here. If you want to come, right? You kind of have to be annoying, and they may say yes, they may say no, but that's something you can put on your resume into building connections, right? You tried, right? I tell my staff all the time, pitch, 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 and it's not on us if they pick it up or not. So transitioning from that role, that being right, that last job, there was still opportunities. We had some really good athletes on the track side. Our soccer team won championships. So there were those stories that were naturally there, but our job as storytellers, sometimes you got to dig a little bit deeper and find those kind of cool connections that your student athletes have. And maybe it's a fun hobby they have or a connection to a community or something unique, right? What makes this story interesting to them? And you can say you did it, right? And whether it's successful or not, that's not really on you. It's do we get them in the door? And then shifting to my role at Charleston right now, Charleston's a very interesting market. There's a lot of sports happening, just not at the highest level, professional-wise, if that makes sense. So College of Charleston is one of 3 colleges here. And then we've got minor league soccer, minor league baseball, and minor league hockey. So there's a lot going on, but we are kind of at the forefront at our institution in the market. And we have probably the most successful team in our men's basketball program that not only garners local attention, but national attention, right? So I was stepping into this role, not ever really having dealt with ESPN or CBS or some of those basketball centric roles, right? Like, and it's just learning, right? People are going to tell you things that you don't know anything about. And it's like, all right, let me figure out really quick what they are talking about, right? And like do it, right? But it's just taking that step and saying that you have tried. It's just building relationships at the end of the day with these people. So let's say you make those pitches in your job you're in now, and they say thanks, but no thanks, right? All right, thanks. I'm going to keep you in mind. Great to meet you. I would love to welcome you to our campus one day, help you out however I can. Really want to build a relationship. Would be my advice for you.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that it's important to, even if you aren't necessarily in a more media relations focused role now, prove that you can find those stories, prove that you know your teams well enough, that you have the stories there, that they're available, and that you're willing to work to find them. And then in Kansas City, we have a pretty saturated market as well. Pro teams all across the board, 3 power conference schools within 2 hours. So it's kind of tough for us to wedge our way into the media, even here locally. So just being happy to work with whoever is willing to work with you, and whether that is the student newspaper, whether that's a fan blog, whether it's just even somebody who runs a random internet blog that they found a story and they want to talk about your striker from Spain for whatever reason. But just finding those stories and then being happy, being willing to work with the people that are willing to work with you. And it really does come down to, like Lynn said, sometimes you have to be a little bit annoying. Sometimes you have to be pesky and be persistent. because not every story that you pitch is going to get picked up, but if you keep putting them out there, one of them will eventually. And just when you do get picked up on those stories, be ready and be excited about the opportunity. Be ready to build that relationship, because then as you continue to move up, that can be someone that you lean on as a resource in the future too, as someone that you have worked with and somebody that can prove that you do a good job in these media relations roles.
I think the only other thing I would add, and it kind of follows back on an earlier point, was just not being afraid to put yourself out there and make those connections. Understand the market that you're in. Are you in a small market, like super small local market in a small town? Are you in a medium market? Are you like, myself or Jerod, where we're in Kansas City or Denver, and it's, you're a small fish in a big pond. But being able to, being willing to reach out to those media partners and like, hi, this is me. I'm at XYZ state. This is who I am. This is what I do. We'd love to have you out sometime. And then also just kind of being able to understand what's a good story to pitch, when to pitch it, being timely. Like, oh, hey, it's getting ready to gear up for a big postseason basketball run, or hey, is your team having a down year, but you're having an individual that's having a really standout season and is, making history. Getting to know those people that you work with in the media. Like we have a reporter out here at our ABC affiliate who played softball in our conference. So like if I ever have a softball story, I know I can pitch it to her and she's going to jump all over it. Um, and just getting to know folks. I've been fortunate where I've kind of inherited some relationships with media through my colleagues, but then there's also been some spots where I've had to reach out to people and get their information and build those relationships myself. So it's all about, again, just relationship building, not just with the media but also with your athletes, and being able to be a storyteller and use whatever mediums are available at your disposal to get those stories out there.
That's great. Thank you guys. And I really like you each kind of touched on it, just being a willing to kind of take a shot. You might swing and miss, but if you don't put it out there, you kind of never know what'll happen. Worst comes to worst, you can tell that story, right? Like if a media member doesn't pick it up, you can kind of go back into your tool bag and tell those stories of your athletes or coaches or staff members too at the end of the day. So looking at a couple more questions in our chat, I really like this one. Is someone who is preparing to move from the Midwest to the West Coast for a communications role. Congratulations, Ethan. How have you handled any moves to a new city, and do you have any advice for getting settled in? Whoever feels kind of passionate and wants to start this one off, Patrick, you might have some good insight here.
As someone who had 4 moves in 4 years, none of them being short at all. First thing is just ask for, what does any kind of relocation assistance look like? Most employers are willing to at least help offset a fraction of the cost. It may not seem like much, but every little bit helps. And then, once you've accepted a position, who you're going to be working with. You're looking to try and find a place to live. Ask those people to like, hey, what's this part of town like? Would you recommend living here? I know when I was trying to move out here, I'm trying to figure out, an apartment to live in online, but obviously I'm showing up, signing up a contract and getting keys and moving in. So it's, I don't have the opportunity to go look at a place before I move in. So asking someone like, hey, can you do me a favor? Look by this place. Give me your thoughts. What do you think? Um, and then once you're, you get to where you're going, just sit down with your colleagues and talk with them about, what to do. What are the things they enjoy doing? Where are things that I should go? What's a good place to go out for drinks? What's a good place to go out for food? What's a good, I like to do whatever activity. What's a good place for me to go do this? And if they don't know, they might know somebody who does. Um, so just, you know, ask as many questions as you can, and then utilize all the resources you have at your disposal to help make that move seamless and as efficient as you can.
Great. Yeah. And I think like finding, outside work hobbies that you're interested in and that you can kind of go immerse yourself in that community a little bit just to make yourself feel like you're a part of what's going on here, whether that's on campus or off campus, because that's how you can meet people, and start to create those friendships and create a little bit of a sense of home for where you are at that point. Next question in the chat. This is an interesting one. Does there ever come a time when you know it's time to transition to a new place of employment or a new role? And I think this is kind of a relatable question. I think like we all kind of in some way or another, you start to get feelings like, okay, should I be moving on or is there more for me here? Is there more for me elsewhere? I think that's super natural to be happening, especially as you evolve in your career. Lynn, when you kind of left your last place to come to Charleston, was there a feeling for you like maybe it's time to switch things up?
Yeah, and I think, yes, like there does come a time when you just know. And it kind of ties back to what your priority list is and what you want not only your career, but like your life to look like at the end of the day. My decision was a little bit of both. I was at a Division III institution, and I loved it and I would have stayed there forever, but I could slowly feel myself getting burnt out. And I wasn't resentful at that point, but I feel like it would have come if I'd continued to stay there. And then life-wise, right? Like I was ready for a new place to live, a new exciting time, right? I was in my early 20s and I wanted to go somewhere and not just be stuck. So yes, I think there is a time and it's like one of those things you just know. And I was applying for jobs just like crazy of anything that even seemed kind of remotely fun. I will caution against that though, because there did get a time when, I was getting calls for interviews and was doing these things and I was sitting on this call that I mentioned my 3 things that I had. Like I was going to take a lot for me to leave and I'm sitting on a call and I'm doing interviews and I'm at schools that don't meet any of those things, right? So it's really important to be honest with yourself, but also to remember like the people are taking a lot of time to talk to you too. And if you know in your heart that's not a place you want to be, right? Like don't waste their time at the end of the day because they could maybe fall in love with you and they could really want you to come and in the back of your head, I'm using this to leverage something else. And I already know that this money isn't going to be great for me. That's a huge thing. Look at the resume and the job that you are applying for, right? It's all laid out there for you. Make sure that before you even start the process, if I get this job, will I take it? And if the answer isn't 100% yes, don't waste your time. Don't waste the school's time, right? Like find something that's going to fit whatever box it is for you. And if those things don't matter, apply away, right? Apply to any job you see, right? That comes back to your list of what you're looking for. But yeah, and it's hard to describe when that time is that and it's a lot of things. And maybe you start the process and you think and then you start interviewing and you're like, oh no, it's not the time. That's okay too, right? Like everyone's figuring it out together.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think trusting your gut is the biggest, I don't know, it's if you can really just like lean in and trust what you're feeling and go off that, I don't think it'll steer you wrong in any situation. Another question in the chat, and Jerod, I think you maybe touched on this a little bit earlier, but how would you recommend networking with semi-local or local nearby colleges, and the communicators in those departments to create some either networking or just like group community type of get-togethers outside of convention?
Yeah, I think, networking is one thing. And building a community is something completely different. And I think that's something that's very important in this industry because it can feel a bit isolating at times, especially if you work in a small department where it's, you maybe one or two other communications professionals where it feels like, okay, these people don't necessarily understand what I do. Coaches may be grateful for what you do. Administrators might be grateful for what you do, but in terms of having someone to actually lean on and talk to and talk through things with, building that community is, extremely important. And just having people that you can reach out to and talk to in terms of actually establishing that network and establishing that community, it comes back to what we've been saying. It's just being bold, putting yourself out there, being unafraid to get shut down maybe once. And if somebody says, no, sorry, I just don't have the time right now, giving other options, okay, can we do like a Zoom meeting? Can we look at next month instead, sometime when your schedule opens up? But being persistent and being bold in the building process of everything. It's something that I am working on doing a lot more this summer too. I think I've done a good job within the CSC, the college sports communications industry, of starting to build a network and building the community. But in terms of other communicators in Kansas City, we have a wealth of resources in the Royals, the Chiefs, Sporting KC, the Current, the NAI and national offices here. All of those things are great resources. And so being a little creative with finding those resources too, and really just being open and willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was gonna say, I'll start with where you are too, right? Like you have to do our jobs, you have to communicate with the people that you're playing, right? So that starts with just when you send rosters and cap files and you're getting things back, pronunciation guides, to be like, hey, I'm Lynn, nice to meet you, would love to connect, here's my roster, right? Start with where you're at and those things will naturally come.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially like if you go on the road with a team to like a nearby school, like when we go, if our team's playing Charlotte, like I'll try to go down the road and then you get to meet those SIDs in person and actually put a face to a name and create those relationships. And I think it goes back to sort of what Lynn just said, and we talked about it earlier, like being someone who responds to emails and responds to them like in a pleasant way. Like that's a great way to just like create relationships and people know like, oh, this is someone who's going to get back to me and help me out, but like also I don't, I can kind of look forward to that email interaction. And you can create friendships and relationships that way too. So thank you everyone for the questions. We've got a couple more minutes, so if there's any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. But I'll kind of start to wind down and wrap things up a little bit, just maybe some pieces of advice and moments of reflection for our three great panelists. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you're just starting in college athletics, what would that be? And Lynn, I'll start with you.
To ask questions, right? You're not supposed to know everything when you walk in, and that's okay, right? If you're coming in as an entry-level position, right, your boss or your supervisor should be expecting to teach you some things, right? And should be expecting to answer questions. And right, if they're not, then maybe that's one of those things on your priority list. You need to look for a spot that is going to answer those questions. But also like take some charge, be bold. We've said that word a lot here. Right, like Google, YouTube. I Google and YouTube things every day, whether it's Photoshop or a rule to a baseball scoring decision, right? Like use your resources, be resourceful, right? Don't be afraid to challenge things and step up and take advantage of the opportunities that are around you, right? Like it's a pretty cool business that we're in. So jump on things if it's something you think you want to stick with.
Patrick, how about you?
Be receptive to feedback, and be willing to not, not take it as a criticism or a knock on anything that you're doing, but rather take it as an opportunity to understand what you're doing well and what you can do better. Because at the end of the day, nobody in this industry wants to see anybody fail, and we all want to help each other do the best that we can do. So whether that be your boss, your colleague, somebody else at another school, somebody else in your league office, if something comes up, don't take it personal. I took so much stuff personally my first couple of years when I was just trying to get started, and um, it affected me, mentally. Sometimes it affected what I was doing with my job. I'd go home and I'd stew on it for a couple hours, but eventually you got to the point where people aren't being critical of me because I'm bad at what I do. They're being critical of me because they want me to be the best I can be. So just understanding that, feedback is not it's not something to be, worried about or anything else, when, performance reviews or anything like that. Um, just be open to have those conversations with people about, why you've been doing things the way you have, and then understanding like, okay, well, here's their perspective, and get that feedback and see what you can do to incorporate that into your routine and your processes and your workflow, and enhance yourself as a professional.
I think my biggest thing, so my second year as a GA here was kind of unique. It was during COVID, during the COVID year, and there was some restructuring. My director of communications was let go. The other communications GA was let go. So I was the only communications professional as a GA in our department. So I was heading up all of our communications efforts alongside being a full-time grad student, alongside, my stipend wasn't covering everything that I needed. So I was working a part-time job for the USTA. I was doing an internship teaching tennis lessons. And so I think the one thing I would go back and tell myself if I could is just not to lose myself. Remember who you are and remember who you are outside of your work, and that not everything has to be a grind. I think there's a lot, and there's some people who really find a lot of their self-value and their self-worth in their work. And if that's you, that's fine. Be careful. But just remembering that you are a person, you are a full person outside of what you do for a living. This pays the bills, and it's a lot of fun. This career, this industry is a blast, but it's also a grind, and you just have to remain balanced and remain within yourself.
We all get
Amazing.
we all get paid to watch sports. It's a pretty sweet gig. Don't get wrapped up in it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. I can't thank you enough for being our presenters today and for this discussion. The members of the CSE Young Professionals Committee was pleased to sponsor this webinar. And as a reminder, this will be available on demand on CSC's website and YouTube channel, and it will also be available as a podcast on your favorite podcast networks. We encourage you to check out our website, collegesportscommunicators.com, for updated information on our on-demand professional development webinars and podcasts and all things membership news. Thanks again for being with us today, and thank you, you three. I really appreciate the discussion.